So Ben asked how I'd like to be introduced. I said, you know, you could mention that, you know, I got my undergraduate degree from MIT in aerospace engineering, and then my PhD, and then went to work for NASA, and then I had to break it to him that that was all BS. None of that was true. The truth is a little less amazing. I was fortunate to have been born here in Huntsville. About the same time that the space, there we go. About the same time that the space, that NASA was founded, and so then after graduating from Grissom High School, that was named after Gus Grissom, who of course perished in the Apollo 1 fire. I went to the University of Alabama. Let's see if we can try it there. And there we go, that's better. And got a business degree from Alabama, then started a career in advocacy and public policy. I went to work for the Chamber in 1991, and I do some kind of hybrid version of government affairs and economic development. My dad was the first space reporter to work for the Huntsville Times, and so he started there in the late 50s and went on to write a couple of books about space, and then most of which were funny stories about, collections of funny stories about the space program. But he did write a very, very serious biography of Wernher von Braun titled Dr. Space. So Steve, who's helped organize the conference, kind of framed what he'd like for me to talk about today, and that is, you know, Huntsville's connection to the space industry is kind of deep and enduring, but you know, what does the future hold for Huntsville? And there's kind of some, I guess, expectation about, you know, certainly challenges that exist. So let's start with a little background on Huntsville and our role with space exploration. First up, our nickname, the Rocket City. It was May the 13th of 1953 when the Huntsville Times reported that the Chamber of Commerce was releasing a new map and brochure about the city, declaring the nickname of the city would be the Rocket City. Previously, we had been known as the watercress capital of the world, so this was kind of a big step up. As I mentioned, I grew up in Huntsville in the 1960s, and as the crow flies, my home was about 10 miles from where the test stands are located, where the Saturn V rocket was being tested. You know, I felt the ground shake as they were testing those engines that would eventually take us to the moon. So that rocket was designed and developed here by Dr. Wernher von Braun. His team had moved here in 1950 from Fort Bliss, Texas, where they had located immediately after World War II. And they were put on Redstone Arsenal, which was the site of an abandoned chemical core operation. It was kind of a remote location. It was really big, 40,000 acres, but it had, kind of most importantly, in addition to a lot of space and some relatively new facilities, access to river transportation, which you were going to need if you're going to be building really big stuff like rockets. So that was the home of the Army's Ballistic Missile Agency, and in addition to developing the Army's missiles, this team also built the Redstone and the Jupiter C. That was the rocket that the U.S. used in 1958 to respond to the Sputnik launch, and you see a picture of it there on the right. That same vehicle was used in 1961, and you see it on the far left, just to kind of put it into some context, to launch Alan Shepard into space, although it was a suborbital trip. Of course, that was after the Russians had launched Yuri Gagarin in 1961. By 1958, Dr. von Braun and his team had started working on the Saturn V rockets, or the Saturn rockets. In 1960, Dr. von Braun and 4,000 of his fellow Army employees traded their NASA badges, or traded their Army badges for NASA badges, and the Marshall Space Flight Center was born there as a 1,900-acre enclave on Redstone Arsenal, 40,000-acre Redstone Arsenal. So Redstone continues its role in the Army's missile development and missile defense, although there's a whole lot more that goes on the arsenal besides just missiles and missile defense. So for the Apollo missions, Huntsville was responsible largely for the development of the launch vehicle itself. So that includes everything except for the capsule and the lander. So that includes things like the fuel tank, guidance and control systems, engines, controllers. After Apollo, Huntsville developed the Sky Lab, which was the first space station that we launched in the 70s. And then the space shuttle, and of course our work on the shuttle included the same things that we kind of done for the Saturn vehicle, which was fuel tanks and engines and boosters. We also developed and manufactured all of the U.S. components for the International Space Station were fabricated at the Marshall Space Flight Center. We currently manage all the science that's done on the International Space Station, so as it's up there orbiting the Earth. So now, we're going to do a quick lesson in gravity and orbital mechanics. I appreciate that this group is smarter than the average bear, but I want to pose a quick question just to make sure we're all on the same page. So right now, the space station is orbiting Earth at an altitude of about 250 miles. So how strong is gravity at 250 miles versus here on Earth? Anybody? Go. Almost exactly the same. So it's 97, 98%. So the only reason that the space station doesn't fall to the Earth like a rock is the fact that it's going really fast. So it's going 17,000 miles an hour. So it's in a constant state of free fall. So it's moving just fast enough to keep it from plummeting to Earth, and not so fast that it spins out into some other orbit. So, now, to get out of low Earth orbit and to get out of Earth's gravitational pull, you have to accelerate to about 25,000 miles an hour. So to lift a mass necessary to carry people and stuff to go to the moon, you need a really big rocket. So now, using our new knowledge about orbital mechanics, we're going to take a look at what's going on in space at these various different altitudes. So space begins at about 100 miles up. The atmosphere is really thin, and you get that dark blue image of space. Later this year, there is still a thin atmosphere up there, but that's kind of where officially space begins. Later this year or early next year, we'll see the first commercial suborbital tourist launches by Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic on their new Shepard and the Spaceship Two vehicles. So those rockets are not going to get into orbit. They're just going to go up to the edge of space, and the passengers will get about 5 minutes of weightlessness. You're weightless from the time that something stops pushing you up until the time something starts slowing you down. So it's going to be about 5 minutes, give or take. The next step above that, of course, up at that LEO at 250 miles, is low Earth orbit. There's a really robust commercial market, to be, from 250 miles up to a few thousand miles up, all the way up to geosynchronous orbit. From those places, you can observe the weather, a whole host of other conditions, fires and stuff like that. We can triangulate our position with GPS, transmit voice, obvious video signals by satellite, and observe heavenly bodies with space telescopes. NASA is slowly moving its human space exploration program out of low Earth orbit, and they're really trying to move more toward deep space. So deep space lies beyond all of these orbits. And for the foreseeable future, it's really kind of the purview of governments. Deep space is not a viable, there isn't a really viable commercial market at this moment. And until we can identify some way for meaningful commercial opportunities, I don't anticipate a big rush to deep space. So now that we understand the difference between suborbital, LEO, GEO, and deep space, let's talk about what's going on in Huntsville, and we'll start by talking about rockets. So today we're developing the SLS rocket. That's the Space Launch System. That's pictured on either side of the Saturn in different variants. It's roughly the same size as the Saturn vehicle. it's been kind of a thrill to watch a lot of this hardware get developed over the years. And I've had a chance to go to Michoud to see some parts of it manufactured. Some of it was manufactured here. On the far right, you can see a picture of the hydrogen stage of that core stage rocket in the test stand that's out at the Marshall Space Flight Center. So that's being tested right now, even as we speak. So testing will begin on the core stage next year. This is a picture of a core stage simulator, and just to kind of put it into perspective, that's me standing at the end of that core stage simulator. That was also made in Alabama. And the picture on the left shows it being positioned at the Stennis Space Center, where they're going to just practice handling this big thing. So once they get used to handling it at Stennis, that simulator will move to the Kennedy Space Center in order to let them practice moving that big thing around. So SLS is the only launch system that's in development now that can lift the Orion space capsule and a lander on a lunar mission. So just to be clear, because there's often some misunderstandings about who can do what. Elon Musk does not have a rocket that can take the capsule that we're developing right now and the Orion space capsule and put it into a cislunar around the moon environment. This chart kind of shows the relative lift capabilities for a mission to the moon and a mission to Mars. And if you want to get that capsule that was designed to take people to the moon and to Mars to the moon, you're going to have the SLS. So so there's really not a commercial market at the moment for deep space exploration. NASA is hoping that other people are going to develop some capabilities to take stuff to the moon into that environment, and I'm sure if they pay them enough money, they will. But beyond that, I'm not really sure. I was at a conference last week, and there was a presentation on commercial lunar activities, and the guy gave a great presentation showing the vehicles and everything. And I asked him, I said, so who are your customers? Who's paying you, to go to the moon? And he said, well, Mexico. And then I'm like, okay, that's not really commercial, but and then he said, well, time capsules. I was like, oh, well, that's certainly it's going to be a rush for time capsules to put stuff on the moon. So I anticipate SLS is going to be a really important part of our future space architecture for many years to come. So besides SLS, how is Huntsville contributing to space launch and space exploration? So United Launch Alliance, ULA, currently manufactures the Delta and Atlas rockets that's shown in the blue boxes on this chart at the Decatur facility that's just a few miles from here. So Atlas and Delta rockets are being manufactured there, and they've started work. Actually, it was out there not too long ago, and they've got parts for the new Vulcan rocket. That's shown in the red box. So that's the rocket that's going to replace the Atlas and Delta rockets. And of course, Atlas and Delta were the primary means of getting stuff into space before Elon Musk and SpaceX got into the act. Blue Origin is manufacturing, or will be manufacturing, their engines, the BE-3 and BE-4 engines, for their New Glenn rockets, and those are shown in the yellow boxes on the charts there. So those engines are going to be built here, and then they're going to be tested at the Marshall Space Flight Center in the old F-1 engine test stand. That was the engine that was used to take us to the moon. So those engines are going to be used both by ULA and, by Blue Origin and ULA. So Aerojet, Rocketdyne recently relocated their advanced manufacturing center north of Huntsville next to the Toyota engine manufacturing facility, and that's where Aerojet Rocketdyne is going to be producing 3D printed components and all their advanced composite structures. Local startup Dynetics also has a firm toehold in the space industry and defense industry. On the SLS program, Dynetics has delivered the stage launch, the vehicle stage adapter, so that's the connector point between the core stage and the upper stages. Lockheed Martin and Boeing, of course, have a large and growing footprint here, supporting NASA and a lot of defense activities. And there are a host of other manufacturers here who supply components to the launch industry. So Teledyne Brown and Brown Precision and GE has opened up a new ceramic matrix composite tape production facility. Ruag manufactures huge composite structures, fairings for rockets here. But the space industry is not just launch. It's obviously what you do while you're in space and then how you use that data when you get back to Earth. The Marshall Space Flight Center is going to continue to have an important role in space exploration too. So Marshall will manage the lunar lander program. So the vehicle that's actually going to descend to the lunar surface is going to be managed at the Marshall Space Flight Center. That's going to be used on the Artemis 3 mission. So there's Artemis 1 that's coming up in 2021, and then a year or so after that, they're going to put a crew on that vehicle. They're going to take it to the moon. They're not going to land. But in 2024, they're planning to actually land people on the lunar surface. And Marshall's probably going to have some other responsibilities for various parts of the lunar mission. Right now, as I mentioned before, Marshall Space Flight Center manages all the payload operations. All the science that's done on the International Space Station is managed by the Marshall Space Flight Center. And Marshall also does all the advanced manufacturing materials and research and development activities. NASA also, of course, I mentioned earlier, all the science being done on the station is being managed by the Marshall Space Flight Center. Boeing manages the ECLSS, which is the life support system on the space station that's reclaiming all the water on the system. They're just upgrading it. Right now it's about 80%, 85% efficient. They've just got a new upgrade. They're going to go to about 98% efficiency in the reclamation of water. And that system, of course, makes oxygen also for the astronauts up there. So what do you do with the data and the material that you gather while you're in space? So early in Huntsville Mayor Tommy Battle's first term, he's now well into his third term, he initiated 3 technology incubation efforts around cyber, around power, and geospatial technologies. I think in the long time, a couple of those initiatives are going to kind of reinforce our space footprint. There's a host of other smaller companies involved in space vehicles and satellite uses. I won't go through all those right now. But this is kind of the most interesting play that the community is making. Sierra Nevada has been awarded a contract to resupply the space station with cargo using its Dream Chaser vehicle. Slightly different from this, but you get the idea. So it looks a lot like a space shuttle, except for terrifically smaller. Huntsville is the only community that's currently pursuing a license to land the Dream Chaser space vehicle at General Aviation Airport. And we hope and expect to have a mission to land here, and I hope y'all will come back for that, to see this thing land. But I hope you see that Huntsville, even though the space industry is growing up all around us and it's a lot more diverse than it once was, it's no longer this monolith of NASA, Huntsville continues to have a bright future, I think, in space and space exploration. And so we don't really intend to relinquish the Rocket City title anytime soon. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you today, and I've intentionally reserved a little time for questions and answers if y'all have any that I might be able to handle.